thank you, Evan. It's fun to be here, and it's fun to see you're the new president, your leadership. That's happened since I was last here. So congratulations to you and to the whole new board.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. It has been quite the day, but we were able to pass paid sick leave, COVID paid sick leave off the floor today, which kept me in Sacramento a little bit longer, but it was good news. And now it heads over to the Senate, where I'm sure it will get equal support. But you know, it was a good day in Sacramento, and we had to make a few adjustments. Actually, one that's really important for Livermore, we had done relief for our businesses on fees they pay the state. So alcohol beverage fees, for example, we're just like, you're struggling, don't pay us this year. And accidentally we had left out small wineries and breweries. So we added them in today. So we did some good work today. So obviously there's 50 plus wineries in Livermore that benefited from our work today, which is nice. So it is good to be with all of you. And I see some of our local electeds. So I started my day with Christy, and now I'm ending my day with Christy. Good to see you. We had a school board association call today, working together for our students and to get them back in the classroom, which is so critical, as all of you know. So that was how I started my day. So it's fun to be back. And I was just talking to Valerie a couple of days ago. So it's fun to be with our local electeds who are so engaged. So you want to talk? Yes, you asked me to come talk about my legislative package, which I will do. We're really excited about this year's legislative package. Some of it is rollovers from last year. Obviously, COVID had a huge impact on our legislative cycle last year. We had to go down to one hearing per committee because of our recess, and then the way we're functioning in the Capitol. We actually don't have very many rooms where we can hold committee hearings right now because we have to be 6 feet apart. And so a lot of our bills got held last year for lack of time. And so a lot of what we're doing actually were introduced last year, and we reintroduced this year because they are priorities for the district, for me, for my office. But I want to first touch on the budget because it's obviously such an important part of what we do. For those that are paying attention to what's happening in Sacramento, budget season is usually June, right? We pass our budget in June. Now, the news keeps talking about how every week is budget season in Sacramento, and it's true. We've been doing budget actions almost every week to try to ensure that we're keeping the state afloat and heading towards a positive recovery. So today's budget bills, as I mentioned, were passed, but we've continued to pass. We passed last week the Golden State Stimulus, which is direct dollars to our EITC individuals in California who get the earned incomes tax credit. So some of our lowest income Californians will get additional money straight from the state in addition to what they're getting from the federal government. So the budget is obviously really important. As you know, last year we cut $54 billion from our budget. Wasn't easy. And I was proud of what we came out with. There's no good situation when you have to cut $54 billion. But in the final version, we really were able to protect our seniors, to protect our students and our most vulnerable. And to me, that should always be our priority. And I think we got there. We went into the budget negotiations with the governor asking for 10% cuts to all of our schools. We were able to stop that. We were cutting many of the best programs with the best results for our seniors. We were able to stop that. We were seeing cuts to our health clinics during a pandemic. We were able to prevent those cuts. So although we did do a lot of cutting and there were some harsh results to that, we did get to see a lot of good things come out of those negotiations that I was proud of. So that, as I mentioned, that work continues. You know, we passed a small business relief bill just 2 weeks ago, $1.5 billion in grants to our small businesses. They can apply for $25,000 each to help get them through this pandemic, which is obviously really, really important. And that, again, is on top of what the federal government is doing. I mentioned the $600 stimulus checks to Californians. We're hoping that will help our low-income Californians get through this time when we know they are so concerned about just putting food on the table. And in that package actually was money for our food banks, knowing that we need to pay attention to food insecurity, and it's one of the issues that is most facing Californians right now. I mentioned my call this morning with Christy from Livermore, but schools are a huge priority. We passed last week funding for our schools, both for learning loss, which is really, really critical. As a mom of 3 school-age children, I see firsthand what this is doing to our kids to be on Zoom. It's hard. And we know that some students are falling behind. So we were able to pass funding to allow schools to do more when it comes to summer school and to additional assistance for students. And we know that funding is critical in that effort. And we don't want the equity gap, the education gap that existed before the pandemic. We know it's only getting worse. And so we are really focused on what we can do to ensure that we continue to work to close that gap. We also passed reopening funds. So for those schools that get their kids back on campus, there are funds for that. I know that there was a great announcement today out of Oakland that they are able to use the funds exactly as we intended to get their teachers back on campus and get the schools reopened. And so that's the goal, is to support schools in getting our students back, to get the mental health of our students to improve. We know that many have been struggling right now, as well as ensure we're meeting their educational needs. At 5 o'clock today, as Sean can tell you, because our phones were ringing off the hook today, the portal opened to help our landlords and our tenants make sure that our tenants can stay in their housing and our landlords can get paid so that they can pay the mortgage and keep the roofs over the heads of those that are living in them. And that's really important. It was $2.6 billion we were able to pass on to landlords and tenants. And so that became live today. And for anyone who needs information, we do have information on that. And we want to help people access those funds, whether it be a landlord or a tenant. Also, I want to touch on Project Room Key. So homelessness obviously was a huge priority of ours prior to the pandemic, but we've been able to put $1.75 billion in homelessness programs. And the reason I want to touch on Project Room Key, which was our money that was spent renting and buying hotels to just put people in housing, has been incredible. So in Contra Costa County, they came out with the data showing that 50% of the people that entered Project Room Key were exiting successfully into permanent housing or supportive housing or some positive housing outcome. That's incredible to have that kind of outcome coming from a housing program. So what's exciting is we've been able to do some things. We're studying how it's working, and hopefully we can continue what is working. And Project Room Key is absolutely, from the data I'm seeing, one of the programs that has really been successful in tackling homelessness, which isn't rocket science. We're putting roofs over people's heads, and that's what we should be doing, and surrounding them with services as well, which is obviously key. Wildfires. I don't need to tell this group that wildfires didn't take a break for the pandemic. It came right up to your community. I know many people in your area were evacuated during the wildfires. Those of you in Pleasanton had the headquarters of those fighting wildfires right there at the fairgrounds. So we have to keep our eye on the ball when it comes to wildfires. So we're continuing to fund wildfire prevention and pre-positioning of our fire personnel, and making sure that we're, doing what we need to do to fight it, not only because of the safety impacts of it, the lives that will be saved, the homes that will be saved, but also the environmental impact, right? I don't know how many of you saw that article, I think it was just last week, talking about how toxic the air from our wildfires is, even compared to other particulate matter and other toxic air. So it's got to be a huge focus of climate change, of the fight against climate change, and we'll continue to keep our eye on it. And that is the perfect segue into my legislative package, because wildfires are a huge focus of what we are looking at. So AB21, which was the first bill we introduced this year, is the Utility Accountability and Wildfire Protection Act, fancy name that we gave it. But it's really simple, and I'm working with the Alameda County DA on this. She and I are co-sponsoring this legislation that will give our district attorneys oversight over vegetation management by the utilities. And that is critical, because we know that when they don't do what they need to do to maintain lines and to do the vegetation management, we have wildfires. We have wildfires like the one we had in Paradise that destroy communities and cost lives of individuals in California. And so currently the only regulatory authority is with the PUC and CAL FIRE. And what we want is for there to be local people who are responsible for ensuring that the IOUs are doing what they're supposed to do. So there's no additional regulation, it's just oversight of current regulation. And if they're complying, they have nothing to worry about. They're all opposing my bill. So that tells you something, but just ensuring that we have additional oversight. And I really think it'll make a difference in getting us to where we need to be with the IOUs. And that bill is up in Natural Resources next week. It's our first hearing. We introduced that bill last year, never got a hearing. So we're already doing better this year than we did last year. But it's one of our top priorities. We think it's a really important change to how we keep our the utilities responsible for the work they're supposed to be doing in our communities. Another bill on fire prevention is coming out of actually 2 fire districts in AD16 have passed an ordinance that requires that when PG&E comes into their territory to do mitigation work, which sometimes involves controlled burns, they have to notify the fire department. That makes sense, right? The fire department is charged with keeping all of you safe and preventing fires from getting out of hand. If somebody's coming into their territory, they should know. Again, PG&E is opposing the bill and opposed both ordinances, but we think it's a really important measure. And again, just making sure that our folks are pre-positioned and ready if a fire were to get out of hand. So hopefully that has no issue. But we'll see. That's also getting its first hearing next week. So the bill that Evan had, I think, focused on in his invitation to me here was AB 988, which I'm not supposed to pick a favorite bill. I'm told I'm not even supposed to fall in love with my bills, but 988 is a huge priority for me in the office, and Evan says it's his favorite. But it's an incredible bill that I'm really excited about, if I do say so myself. So AB 988 would set up a telephone number, functions basically like 911, except not a law enforcement response. So you would call this number just like you call 911, and you would, oh, Alice is showing, we've been getting a lot of press for this bill. So I think the public likes it, which is really exciting. So you would call this number, and if somebody you knew or loved, or you yourself were in mental health crisis, and instead of getting a law enforcement response, you would get a response from a crisis support team with mental health professionals. And the idea is really to say that mental health is a healthcare issue. It is not a criminal justice issue, and it should be treated like one, and you should get a healthcare response. And you may need a response team right then, but it doesn't have to be law enforcement, right? It can be mental health professionals. And so we're working with the counties to set up those mobile response teams, and we're setting up this telephone number that would allow for the dispatch of those response teams. And, you know, when you look at the data around what is happening in our communities, 25% of all officer-involved shootings involve individuals who are in mental health crisis. So that's an incredible statement I just made, right? If we can say that that 25% don't even get a law enforcement response, right? We are changing the dynamic of officer-involved shootings in a really dramatic way. In addition, I learned last week the largest mental health provider in the nation is the Los Angeles County Jail System. That is not what our mental health community deserves, for the jails to be their provider of resources. It's true in our area too. And I will answer Jeff's question. So we really want to take this out of the criminal justice realm and put it where it needs to be and get people the care they need. Obviously, this phone number is the first step, this dispatch of mobile response teams. We have to have the beds to support individuals who are in crisis. We have to ensure we have care from start to finish, but this is a really important step. As for funding, the bill is self-funding. It has a fee that mirrors the 911 fee that would cover it, and it would be on your phone bill, and it would cover the entire system. So that's how the funding mechanism works, which is obviously really important right now as we don't know where our budget is going. But it's a really exciting thing, and I think there's such a focus on healthcare and how we should be treating it that hopefully that is something that people are willing to support. That is a little bit, I don't know if there were more questions that night. I saw Sean write something. But yes, I know the Tri-Valley cities are supporting it. Alameda County is moving in this direction, and we're really, really excited about this effort. It was, the idea came out of a discussion I had. I know some of you have been involved with the Miles Hall Foundation. And NAMI is a sponsor of the bill, yes, and the Psychological Association. But the Miles Hall Foundation was formed by Miles's mom after he was killed in Walnut Creek in the middle of a schizophrenic episode by law enforcement. And part of what, as mom talking to another mom who had lost her child, which as every parent on this Zoom knows is her nightmare, her worst nightmare, and hearing the ways that we had failed that family, and she had done everything she could to get into mental health care, he needed. And when he was in crisis, she called 911 because that's who you call, right? And just listening to the ways that we could have intervened prior to even that day, it became clear to me that that needs to be our focus in order to save lives like Miles, right? Is to provide a system that responds and that gives individuals the care they need when they're in mental health crisis. So hopefully we'll pass this bill, and it's a really important step in getting there. I continue to be really focused on gender equity and parity in California. We randomly, looking at the code in the middle of the night one night after Attorney General Becerra was nominated to AG, I was reading the code on what the qualifications were for Attorney General, and I found that our code, as it relates to constitutional officers, is all male. He, despite the fact that over half of our constitutional officers are now women. So we're changing that, because I actually do think it's really important that our code reflect our values, and it shows that women or non-binary individuals, because we're going to gender neutral language, can serve in these offices just as much as men can. And obviously it's a vestige of our history that women and non-binary individuals weren't serving in these offices, but we are now, and we deserve to be there, and the code should reflect that. So I'm working on that with Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, and it's we think it's going to be a good but easy effort, hopefully. We're also carrying a bill focused again on non-binary individuals that came out of one of my staff in the district office. For those of you that know Katie, Katie had a dear friend who passed away who was non-binary. And although you can be non-binary on your driver's license and on most forms in California, after death, you cannot mark yourself as non-binary. The death certificate only allows you to be male or female. And coming out of that experience, she came to us and talked about it. And we decided that one should have the dignity of identifying as they identify, both in life and in death. And so we are moving a bill that would change that, and death certificates will reflect a non-binary individual. If it, one of the things we want to do is respect the person who's deceased. And so it will be, if it was on their driver's license, if they sought that identification in life, then it will be reflected for them in death. And I think that's really important. AB 1287, which is an effort that has been going on probably for a decade in the legislature, but we're going to bring it home this year, you guys. It's the pink tax. So California passed a law that you cannot charge women a different price for services than men. Dry cleaners, massage therapists, any service. But we don't have that for goods. So currently, if you walk into a store, you may notice that gendered goods are more expensive when they are pink or being marketed towards girls or women. Well, in a state where we believe in gender equity, that's no longer acceptable. So we're moving the pink tax, and hopefully we can get parity in what we charge men and women. We're actually doing that in concert with Assemblymember Lowe, who's moving a really exciting bill about department stores and ensuring that there's opportunity to go into a department store and not have gendered departments as well, which a dear friend of mine actually who has a non-binary child was really excited about, because that was one of the biggest struggles for her non-binary child, was deciding which department to go to in a store. And these are things that lived experience I don't have, but I think that we need to be an inclusive society that really reflects who we are and where we're going. So we'll be working together on moving both of those bills to ensure that our stores reflect equity in every way. I saw Jonathan ask a question about a bill. I don't think I've gotten there yet. Should open the chat and look. 439. I've got.
I think you already just kind of answered it.
Oh, I did.
About the non-binary markers.
Okay.
But I was having a conversation with Rick Spur from Equality California, and we've been having some issues with local sheriff's departments not being able to collect SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity data from suicides in California, because they don't have, you know, kind of that guidance from the state as what our local sheriffs have told us. And so I was wondering what you thought about that.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't know of that issue, but it's important. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the work we've done about hate crimes reporting, right? We can't know what's happening unless we're collecting the data, right? And we know that non-binary, that LGBTQI individuals, that suicide is an issue, right? And the more we know about that in the data, I think would be helpful. So if we're not collecting it, we need to do more to do so. And we've run bills on the hate crimes issue, right? So hate crimes, one of the issues was we weren't collecting ethnicity, right? Which then didn't tell us as Californians what was happening in the world of hate crimes. And we've been working a lot on that. And this sounds very similar, obviously a different issue, but just you can't understand these issues unless we work to identify them. So we'll have to look into that. Thank you. So choice, as many of you know, I'm the chair of the select committee on reproductive health. We changed it actually from women's reproductive health to reproductive health. We've done some work on trans, and so we thought that the name should reflect the work, trans issues. So we changed the name, so it is just reproductive health generally. But I'm carrying a bill on security as it relates to those individuals, both patients and the workers in our reproductive health clinics. It is an issue that has always been around, that the safety of those who go into our reproductive health clinics and those who work in it is at risk. And that has only gotten worse in the last few years. And Planned Parenthood anticipates that actually with a friendly administration and legislature in Washington, that could get worse as we continue to move towards better reproductive health. So we're carrying a bill that would ensure that there's training for law enforcement on the issue, that we have adequate penalties for these crimes so that the police show up, and that we are covering actually, and also updating the law, because some of the crimes that relate to some of the doxing and other things that are happening online aren't covered by the code right now. So updating it and ensuring that we're protecting those individuals enough. I talked a little bit about the budget actions we're taking on small businesses, but obviously small businesses are a huge focus for us. 70% of California's workers are in small businesses. We know that in order to recover and protect the California economy, we have to be focused on getting California small businesses through this pandemic and recovering well. So I'm carrying a couple bills on that. One is focused on ensuring that as we've expanded paid family leave, we want to ensure that people have that leave. We don't want our small businesses to be suffering under spurious lawsuits. So ensuring that mediation is actually the solution of choice, so that the workers are getting the rights they need, but that we don't have lawsuits that are harming our small businesses. So that's one of the bills that we're working on. And then I'm carrying AB 1242, which is the Restaurant Recovery Act. It would allow for the next few years for restaurants to continue to do to-go cocktails under the same parameters in the executive order, so that they can use that to try to spur some extra income, and that they can get through this, because we know our restaurants have just been hurting so much through this pandemic. Criminal justice reform, we touched a little bit on AB 988, which obviously I see as a huge criminal justice reform measure, but we're doing other things in addition. It's an area I love to work in, and I think there's a lot of work to do in. One is we have moved, as some of you may know, we moved the juvenile justice system out into the Department of Social Services, which was a really positive move to take it out of sort of the criminal realm and put it into social services. One of the concerns coming out of that, though, is that judges, now that DJJ is gone, they will move more youth into adult court and put them into the adult system rather than treating them as juveniles. And so we're fixing the appeals process for juveniles who are transferred to adult court, ensuring that they don't lose the right to appeal that decision. It's a really important decision for our juveniles. There are huge implications to being charged as an adult in adult court, and they should have a right to appeal that. And we're protecting that and ensuring that happens. I'm re-carrying my bill that the governor vetoed last year. We still don't really understand why he vetoed it, so we're continuing to work with the governor's office, but AB 731 is a reporting bill on recidivism. So it's asking counties, how are you spending these dollars we're giving to you that are meant to prevent recidivism? What programs are they going to, and what are the outcomes? Are you actually preventing recidivism? And we think it's a smart spending measure. Tell us how you're spending your money and let's spend it on the things that are working. We think it would help improve lower recidivism rates, and the governor vetoed it. So we're going to carry it again, and we're hoping to figure out how we can prevent that, because we think it's an important step in ensuring that we have better outcomes coming out of prison. These are great, some are great programs, and some we think aren't having the outcomes we want. Let's spend our money where we're actually going to get the results that are best for everybody. Focusing a little bit on consumer protection, I won't go too far into that, but people are having to take out a lot of loans and access money, and we continue to focus on how we can protect consumers through that, through the pandemic. The last area that I'll touch on is environmental. As you know, it's my background, it's my passion. Climate change is one of the most important, if not the most important issue facing this generation. And so I'm continuing to spend a lot of my effort working in that space. So there's an exciting bill I'm working with the Bay Area Air Quality Resource District on, which is a data collection bill, allowing them to collect data as it relates to mobile sources of pollution. Currently, that's left just to the California Air Board. And what we really want is to give our local authorities the ability to collect that data and make changes to improve air quality in our communities. In Livermore, you're getting an Amazon distribution center. That's happening in communities across our area and across California. And we want to understand how that's affecting the air quality in your community and work to ensure that we're mitigating those impacts, because we know and we are seeing right now that the health impacts are real. People are dying in communities of color right now because they live in communities where the air quality is not as good. And so we need to understand it, and we need to put our resources where we can to ensure that we're lowering those impacts and doing the best we can for our communities. Clean energy, I'm doing a bill on behind the meter storage. So think batteries, right? So we have batteries now on homes, on schools, on businesses, on multi-family.
On this call. The county said.
On multifamily housing. And when we shut off the power in August, all of that energy was just sitting there, right? We were doing rolling blackouts, and there's all this clean energy sitting behind the meter, and there's no way to access it on the grid. And so we are doing a bill that would mandate that the PUC create a system to buy and use that clean energy. Stop buying dirty energy from Nevada when it gets hot. Let's use the clean energy that's sitting right here on our grid. And so I'm really excited about that bill. That one has an uphill battle, but it's an effort that I think is really important and that I will continue to work on. By the way, it would reduce your utility rates as well. So that's a win-win, because you should see the price we pay for energy during those spikes, especially when you have spikes across the whole Western United States. And here is energy that is sitting on our grid in our communities that we are just not using. So I think it's a great bill. I introduced a bill to ban neonicotinoids. Now, many of you may not know what neonicotinoids are, but when you hear about the bees in California dying, they're dying because of neonicotinoids. It is in seeds that are planted, and it gets into the bees that pollinate off the plants, and it kills them. And the EU has banned neonicotinoids, and this would mirror the EU ban and allow us to get to a better ecosystem in California. That's a big lift, let me tell you. We got a lot of opposition, but it's really important. So we're gonna take on that fight. And then lastly, for all of us, Tesla Park. It's a fight we're not giving up. We continue to work with the governor's office to try to figure out how we can save Tesla Park and preserve that land. For those that are paying attention, there was an incredible court decision that came out about that beautiful open space in Livermore that said that the state can use the resources in the off-road vehicle fund to preserve that land. And so we are now pushing that. Not only am I saying it, the court has said it. So now we got two branches of government behind us that we should that land can be preserved and that it is not a misuse of the funds. So we continue to push on that, and we're going to get that to the finish line. I'm determined. So hopefully this is our moment to do that. So that's a little bit about my legislative package, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I was trying to pay attention to the chat, but I'm sure I didn't catch them all.
Do we want to have people raise their hand so we don't have madness? Raise your hand.
So thank you very much. I just really wanted to thank you, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan. This is absolutely a game-changing legislative platform. I'm super impressed by everything you've been proposed, and it is transformative. So I'm very grateful to you for doing this. And then, yeah, if people want to ask questions, if you can raise hands so we don't have everyone speaking at once, I would appreciate that. And I do believe we have Ellis first with a question.
First of all, as always, it's great to see you, Rebecca.
Good to see you, Ellis.
So proud of you. You mentioned about the Alameda County DA, Nancy O'Malley, having some purview over PG&E. Does she have any teeth? I don't mean the kind in your mouth, but does that legislation have any teeth? Should the PG&E executives make decisions that Nancy O'Malley's office finds objectionable for whatever reason? What's the recourse?
And maybe
So
you
the
get Diana
recourse-
back on there too.
Wait, sorry, Sharon. What did Sharon say?
Maybe you can get Diana Beckton on that too.
It is, and it went before the DA's Association recently, and they were going to vote on it. Actually, the co-sponsor is the DA up in Paradise, who, because the goal of this legislation is to prevent what happened up there. So
Right.
he came on as a co-sponsor because he said, I didn't want to go after them after they killed dozens of my residents. I want to go after them before and stop it, right? And that's what this bill is really focused on, is wildfire prevention. So the answer is yes, and I had a call with Edison today in which they were highlighting how strong the teeth were, because the fines are per day violations, which are pretty standard in the regulatory realm, but would add up to a lot of money if they failed to do what they're supposed to do. Now, the good news is we actually just put in, which I think is a good amendment, a right to cure. So when the utility finds out they're in violation, they can cure the violation, which is our goal, right? We're trying to prevent the wildfire. And so if you cure it and fix the problem, we're happy. And then there would be no fine. But if they fail to, the fines are per day, and they could end up being very, very, very expensive.
People on this call pay the fines, not the executives who make the decisions. Let's get that straight. PG&E only has one source of income, and it's us ratepayers. So any fine that you put on PG&E is really a fine on ratepayers rather than the executives who are responsible for the decisions. But that said, this club had a special meeting a couple of weeks ago for a piece of legislation, I forgot the actual number, that said that the qualifications for sheriff should be changed from having several years as a sheriff or a peace officer to anybody who's a citizen of California could run for DA in their county. And I was wondering if you've taken a position on that, and know that the club has taken a position of, yes, we would like that. And you may remember in the last election, the Democrats had no candidate for sheriff. Patrick Veneer looked like a good guy, but didn't have those prerequisites, although he is, as you probably know, a district attorney in Santa Clara. So if you've taken a position on that.
I have not. And is there, I don't think there's pending legislation on that. Is there? That I just don't know about yet?
Yeah,
Oh, there
is.
Helen is shaking her head, yes.
I'll get to you and Sean with the actual number.
Got it. No, I mean, I imagine that would come before the Public Safety Committee. So, but it says, I noticed it's a Senate bill. So it has to get through the whole Senate before it gets to us. That's probably why I'm not aware of it yet. But no, I will take a look at that. That's really interesting. And I haven't thought about it, to be honest with you. The same is true in Contra Costa County as well, that they've, not found.
I mean, the problem is that these sheriff candidates run unopposed. Our current sheriff, I think, was first elected in 1996 and has not hit any opposition at all in all of those years.
Interesting. Okay. No, I'll take a look at it. Thanks for pointing it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I will throw this one out and just ask you to look at it, as well as another bill that we supported, which is AB 1838. It's the repeal of the ban on sugar-sweetened beverage taxes. So
I just heard about that the other day.
Yeah. So I figure, look it up and then come back to us and let us know if you're a supporter.
Yeah, no, it was, I think Nazarian is involved in that. He brought it up with me and he was telling me, because I wasn't around for the first vote, right, that we're repealing. He was telling me, I need to hear the whole story and get the background. I said, I'd love that. So.
Yeah, he's the sponsor of it, and a friend of mine actually has been the leaders of kind of the push for it. So I'm supporting it. I hope you will, but I won't make you take a stand on the spot.
You now have all learned that I'm a geek who likes to read it first, which I think is a good thing.
Right.
We have another hand raised from
I see
Victor.
Victor's hand is up.
Victor?
His virtual hand.
Yes, my virtual hand. Thank you, Assembly Member. First time hearing you speak, and you were amazing. Great
you.
slate of legislative bills. I just had one question in regards to the mediation bill. I didn't catch the number, so if I can get the number, that would be great. And then I just was curious on your reasoning behind that. Has there been a lot of frivolous lawsuits against small businesses? And what does that mean for someone who is filing a lawsuit that they have to go through mediation first? Like, what is the process?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. That's a great question. I, as a former litigator, am always nervous about it. You know, in every profession, and I'll own in my own, you know, there's good actors and there's not so good actors, right? And when we passed paid family leave bill last year that reduced the number of employees you had to have to require you to give that leave, one of my concerns was that, you know, I represented companies that had the means to hire a lawyer. Right? My local restaurant that has like 5 people working behind the counter doesn't have access to counsel, right? They don't have a lawyer. They can't pay for a lawyer. They don't know what it means to get a demand letter, right? And so my concern was you could really shake these businesses down pretty easily if they don't have lawyers and understand that actually the whole point of this bill was to give people leave. And if you give people leave, you're fine, right? And so we, in the bill last year, negotiated mediation, and it's through the department. So it does not cost anybody anything. It doesn't cost the employer anything, and it doesn't cost the employee anything, which is really important because if you go to private mediation, that's not true. It's very, very expensive. But this is covered by the department. And the goal of this is really the minute the department, I believe, says to these small employers, oh no, this is covered leave, you need to give it to the employee, that these small employers will do it, right? This isn't about shaking anybody down or anybody getting in trouble. It's about ensuring people have the right to take the leave they needed. And it's pretty expansive, right? I mean, it wasn't just your blood relatives, right? That if you're a caregiver of someone in a long-term relationship, you might be covered, right? And so a small employer wouldn't understand that or have the HR department to deal with that. So the mediation really gave a framework, I believed, that that provided both employers and employees with the access to know their rights and then work it out without having to go to court. Now, if they don't work it out, they get to go to court and they get to sue, right? So it's just a first step, and it's in order to go to court on one of these claims, you have to get a right to sue letter from the department anyways. So you kind of have to go through the department. So this is just a step before you would go. Currently, it's not mandatory. You can get that right to sue letter without going to mediation. And this would just say, let's do that mediation first. Let's try to resolve this easily and quickly and with low cost and get the worker the leave they need and ensure the employer doesn't have to spend all this money on lawyers. And if that doesn't work, then you can go to court. So we're trying to make it as easy and quick and the notice really clear so that it won't get in the way of a lawsuit if it was needed, but that we're preventing lawsuits that may come. I don't have any evidence that that would happen, but I don't think there's a downside to this. It's also quicker. I mean, a lawsuit takes years, and that's not what we want. We don't want people languishing in court. We want them getting their rights. So
thank you.
That's the goal. And the number. I'm really bad at the numbers. I confess to all of you.
I dropped it in the chat
Oh,
for
great.
you. So that one's AB 1033, and the link that I put in there goes directly to the bill. So any of the bills on the Ledge Info website, whether it's the assembly members or others, you can also track. So you can keep track of the status of the bill as it moves through the legislature.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you again for filling us in. Like I said, a very exciting platform. I had one last question for you because it did sort of come up, and you could give us some insight on this. As these bills are coming along and from different sponsors, if we wanted to bring one to your attention, or if one of your bills we wanted to bring to other people's attention to support it, what do you think the best way to go about that is?
So if you have a bill idea, we actually do have a link on our website that allows you to submit. It ought to be a law, is what it's called. It's like an ought to be a law link, which Sean, I don't know if you want to help drop it in, but you can actually submit it. And my ledge director reviews all of those and we talk about them. And so that is a great way. And, you know, if you want a meeting on that, we can do that as well to talk more about it. But we do review them, and we have carried, like I said, I mean, I carried I'm carrying this bill that came out of one of my staff members. Some of you may remember the bill that we did a couple of years ago on peanut allergies, on ensuring that restaurant workers are aware of those deadly allergens and are trained on how to handle it, which came out of a family in Danville, right, that had had a really bad experience with their daughter. And so we do actually, you know, my conversation with Town Hall turned into AB 988, right? So we are really listening to the community and what it is you want to see. Not everything, I have to be honest, we do get a lot of ideas. I don't know, I'm giving the examples of the ones that did become bills. But, you know, we do listen and, you know, look into it. And so it is worth, if you have an idea, talking to me, or sometimes there's, you know, we've also done, I have colleagues who specialize in certain areas, right? I don't do a ton of work, you know, in certain areas because it's not where I'm comfortable per se, and my colleagues do, and that's the beauty of a legislature. So sometimes we'll say, this is a really good idea. There's actually this legislature who might be really interested, and sometimes we can refer you. And we've gotten bills that way, actually. Someone who's come to another legislature is like, oh, RBK does this, you know, let's send this her way. So we do work together sometimes to place bills. And then if there's a bill that's in process that you want to support, there's a couple ways. If you write in through our web form or call in, then it automatically, it's amazing. I've actually been in meetings and shown people this, and it's very cool. So when I am looking at a piece of legislation on my iPad, there's a tab that says constituents, and I click on it and it shows me every single one of you by name who called for and against. So when I'm reviewing legislation, I have at my fingertips what you've called about and how many of you have called. So it's actually an amazing system that works, and we all look at it and it gives us real time. So that's really helpful, and that will happen if you call in or if you use the web form. It's more work for Sean and the team. If you call in, the web form automatically puts it there, but we love your calls, so call in. So that's a really easy way, and you get counted. Like, here's the web form, Sean says. So that's really, it's helpful. And, you know, it's funny because not many people call on bills, I'll tell you. So if we get 100 people on a bill, it takes me aback. Like, that doesn't happen very often. And so it really indicates to me, wow, this is something my constituents are really paying attention to. And I look deeper, and it does influence me. So please do that. I recommend that. Now, if you have more than that, right, you want to do more than just say I'm for or against this, then, you know, feel free to ask for a meeting. I try to meet with all the constituents who ask. That isn't, depending on the time of year and what's going on in Sacramento, but sometimes that's challenging, but my staff sometimes takes those meetings and briefs me. But we do love hearing from all of you. So, you know, you can call. And then if you have one of my bills, for example, you don't need to call me, I'm carrying it, you know, I'm going to support it. But let's say you love this neonicotinoid ban. Okay. You're like super passionate about the bees, like I am, then we're going to need help on that, right? Like, I'm going to need certain members to support that bill to get it through, right? It's going through Dr. Quirk's committee. You probably have friends in Dr. Quirk's district, right? In Alameda County. So, you know, it's really helpful sometimes for me to say, like, I need you to get all your friends calling Dr. Quirk. And again, if like 60 people call, we notice, because that's how few people tend to write in or call. So that's really helpful, right? If you have connections in other districts on a bill and you can get their constituents to call, that's really impactful. And like I said, it doesn't take many to really make a difference.
Awesome. That's excellent advice. And I'm looking forward to us actually enacting it. So make sure if there's bills that you loved on the list, you know, spread the word about them. If there's other bills that you think are really important, you know, send the information over, use the web form, or if you want, call, but use the web form is clearly the preference. So make sure you get that information over. I just want to thank you for coming out. I want to remind all our members, you know, if you want to support Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan, please go to her website. I encourage you to donate. I don't know what specific hat you're wearing right now, so I'm not going to ask you to say anything on this. But I encourage you to go to her website, learn more about her, support her if you can. She's been wonderful to our club and longtime supporter of the club, and has been here since before she was a member of the Assembly. So really appreciate everything you've done for us. And thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you for all the information.
Well, thank you all. I mean, Alice will know, as many of you know, this was the first club that would come out for me. that really took a step out and endorsed me when nobody else wanted to take a stand. And you know, I know you did the same for the congressman. And so you have a reputation for it, and it's really, it's bold and it's brave and it's meaningful, and I won't forget it. So thank you.
Thank you.
You made my day.
Thank you.
Oh, and I have, Jeff, is it something quick?
Wait, he took his mute off.
Accidental. It was excellent. I just want to thank the assembly member. She hasn't already dropped off. But no, I
Oh, no, I'm
raised
here.
my hand by accident.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. And then thank you. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you would like. It's absolutely a pleasure, but I know you're
Awesome.
busy, so your choice.
I haven't had dinner. I'm gonna go eat dinner. But thank you guys.
Well, thank you so much for